What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the next edition of my console collection series. And today I'm going to focus on the Sega Saturn. However, I'm also just going to be focusing on my import Japanese collection of Sega Saturn games. I recently finished the US set. That video, I don't know really how I'm going to present it without boring you to tears due to how many titles there are. So I figured I'd start with an easier video, and that would just be my import game collection. As always, I'm going to start off a little bit about the Sega Saturn hardware and my story with it. I think I'll save the full story for the US video. But what I did want to say about this system is this is one of the easiest systems to play import games on by far. Really, all you need is a Sega Saturn console. This is the second variation. This is a US version console. You can get an imported Saturn console if you'd like. However, all you really need is this magic tool right here. There are a few different import cartridges available, but this is the Action Replay 4 Meg Plus. And the reason I like this one so much is that it lets you play import games. It lets you play 1 meg memory SNK required games and 4 meg memory Capcom required games. So for either of those types of games that require extra memory, this has both of those built on board. Also has a backup save feature and like a Game Genie type cheat code system. So really all you need in one right here. These aren't built perfectly. Every once in a while you'll have a glitch with it as far as like making contact with the system. But overall I've had this for about nearly 20 years now, and it's served me very well. So really all you need to get up and going with Sega Saturn importing is one of these simple cartridges. Like I said, no system modding required, and you're good to go. I'm not going to talk a whole lot, like I said, about my Saturn itself, other than to say this is one of my favorite pieces of hardware from its design and functionality standpoint. So with that said, I do want to go ahead and start with the games, but you will hear more about my hardware and how I came to get into Saturn in another video soon. So the first game I want to show you is one that I'm going to struggle with the pronunciation of right off the bat. This one is Tudio Arokatawa Sandaharu, or something thereabouts. What you need to know about this game is this is part of Sega's Puzzle and Action arcade series. There were several of these released for the Saturn, and really all these are is minigame collections. These were way ahead of their time as far as I'm concerned. Quick action arcade fun, you know, nothing too crazy, nice 2D display on these, and you can pick these up pretty cheaply. So there's a couple of these out there. I think I have 2 or 3 in my collection, and yeah, if you're looking for some good minigame action, they're worth picking up. The next one is Assault Suit Lenos 2. And the way you would know this game better is this is a semi-sequel to Assault Suits Vulcan, which was a Sega Genesis game that we got as Target Earth. Very cool mech action game, a little bit slow-paced, but definitely some good fun, and well worth playing. Next is one of my all-time favorites on the Japanese Sega Saturn. This is really one of the great reasons to why you should get into import games for the system. This has gotten ungodly expensive in the last year. It really has taken off in price. I bought mine a long time ago, but that is Batsugen. And Batsugen is a port of the final arcade release by one of my favorite arcade developers, Toaplan. This was a port of their 1993 arcade game. It is a shooter, and it is one of the first of the so-called bullet hell style shooters. However, I don't think this one sacrifices style for the massive bullets on the screen. The bomb explosions are especially pretty. They have a lot of use of color, and there's some nice little Easter eggs in here, like getting little pigs to pop out as you're playing. Great shooter game, and highly recommended for the Sega Saturn. Just try to find it at a decent price if possible. I think these are starting to go for like $250, something like that. I don't even know anymore. But definitely a great game for the Sega Saturn, and a real shame we didn't get this in the US. The next one is another shooter, and this one is another one I'm going to butcher the title of. This is Bokan to Teppatsu Doranbo Kanpeki Ban, or something thereabouts. Time Bokan is basically the theme of this one. That was a Japanese anime from the 70s, I believe. They made a shooter based on that, and knowing that I don't really have any special affinity for the characters in this, can't really tell you a whole lot about the storyline. It's a very wacky shooter, but to be honest, it's got a lot of mechanical gameplay difficulties. It's really not that fun to play. Honestly, looking at this, I might want to sell this because it's not really one of my favorites on the Saturn and never really has been. So we'll just move on. The next one is a great import game, and this is one of the very first games I picked up for the Japanese Sega Saturn, and that is Bubble Symphony. This is another port of a Taito arcade game, in this case. Taito arcade games were very commonly ported by this developer, Fang, and they did a really excellent job with just about everything they brought to the Sega Saturn, as well as a couple other systems. Basically, just a nice update on the classic arcade Bubble Bobble. You get about 100 levels again, I believe. You have the addition of female bubble dragons in this one. So you have Bubblun, Bubblun, Kululun, and Koruran, or something like that. So yes, you get the whole family of bubble dragons for this game. Really fun game, well presented, and as the title alludes to, it has very symphonic orchestral style music, so it's really fun to listen to as well. This has been included in some of the Taito arcade packs, and unfortunately a lot of the Saturn games that I have by Taito are no longer necessarily exclusive to the Japanese Saturn for home release due to those Taito arcade packs, but I really like the artwork on this one, and definitely a highly recommended piece of my Saturn collection. Next we have another shooter, and this is the classic Dodonpachi by the developer Cave. Atlas ported this to the Saturn, as well as the PS1. This one's a little simpler than most of the other Cave shooters that came later. This was very early. I believe some of the developers at Toaplan formed Cave, so you can kind of see a little bit of resemblance to that game Batsugan I showed you earlier. But this one is well received and it plays well on the Saturn, so definitely a good one you can get. As far as all the shooter prices go, this one's not one of the more expensive ones, so definitely still in the league of getting at a reasonable price. Then we have the sequel to Dodonpachi, which is Dodonpachi, and this one is much crazier than Dodonpachi. Very, very bullet hell type shooter, again developed by Cave. Couple different kinds of ships you can choose from in this one. Really nice style and very frantic gameplay. I've always liked this game. I've owned it for a really long time and can highly recommend this one for the Saturn as well. This one came out on the Japanese PS1 also, and some people have said that that version is actually even better than the Saturn, which is unusual because the Saturn is known for having the best 2D games. So I'd always like to try that at some point and make that comparison, but either way you go, you can't really go wrong with Dodonpachi. Next is Dungeons and Dragons Collection, and this is ports of two Capcom arcade games, Towers of Mystaria, and I can't remember what the other one is, but basically they're two Dungeons and Dragons arcade releases. These are both beat-em-ups. This is a very desirable collection for the Saturn. However, yet again, this was released on a Capcom arcade pack in the following year, so you can get this game for much cheaper than going after this expensive Saturn version. However, it's very good to have on your Saturn if you're looking for some solid 2D action. This does support the RAM cart, so you get that little graphics boost from that. And very fun game. I believe this actually came out on Japanese PS3 recently too. I haven't picked up that version of it, but definitely a very fun arcade beat 'em up. And next is another Taito arcade port. This one has also shot up in price a ton in the last 6 months. I don't really know why. But this is another excellent port of a Taito arcade game called Elevator Action Returns. Was brought over by Fang yet again. And it also includes the original elevator action as a little secret bonus in this game. Way I would describe this game is it's kind of a mix of Rolling Thunder and the original elevator action, as well as some other run and gun games. Really fun action. I really like the level design in this one. They were incredibly creative, and definitely a highly recommended game for your Saturn if you don't pick it up on one of those Taito arcade collections, which it's also featured on as well. So definitely very cool game. Don't really know why the price is shooting up so much, but well recommended title for your Saturn. The next one is one that is not available on any other format as far as I am aware. Maybe the arcade would be it, and that is Guardian Force. This is a really cool tank shooter, and it was developed by Success. I always like games developed by Success. Great level design, very fun controls, nice and colorful. Just a really well done game. This one flew under the radar for a really long time, and I've noticed lately that the price on this one's getting really expensive too, but I think it's for a good reason. You're getting an exclusive game, it's very low print as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of fun for the Saturn. Definitely recommend Guardian Force to a lot of people. Next we have the original Gunbird. This is another shooter port for the Saturn. This was developed by Psycho. This is one of the very first games they developed, and I've always liked this game quite a bit. I would say it's been eclipsed by several other games in the series afterwards, but and other Psycho shooters that they developed. But overall, I like the style of this one. I think it's very easy to pick up and play. You get 6 characters to choose from, and they all have a lot of character to their design, so it's really a fun game. This one came out in a lot of different formats. You can get Gunbird collections for the PS2 import. They also released this in the US as Mobile Light Force for the PS1 with some really hideous artwork. But as far as I know, other than the cover art, the game is the same. So definitely a good one to pick up at a low price. I don't really know where the Saturn price is on this one anymore, but definitely a good one to have in your collection. Next is another shooter, and this is by the developer Rising. This is an arcade port as well. This game is called Kingdom Grand Prix, and it has a really unusual theme of being a racing shooter. So not only are you trying to clear the stage, but you're trying to beat the other ships to the finish line. Very cool in theory, however, I don't really love how this one plays. I don't know, I've never really got into it too much. Some of the Rising shooters aren't as endearing to me as like Toaplan and Psycho, so if you like Rising shooters, you'll probably like this game, but it's never been, really been one of my favorites. Next we have Last Gladiators version 9.7. So if you remember, we do have Last Gladiators available in the US as a pinball title, and it is a very realistic looking sim-style pinball game. The version 9.7 was a Japanese exclusive, and I can't remember if it added an extra table or if it was more just bug fixes for the existing tables. However, this one is slightly enhanced over what we got in the US, so I decided to get it years ago. I really liked games by this developer Kaze. They developed those very realistic pinball games, and they've put them out on several different consoles. Don't really know what happened to them anymore, but they've put out a lot of my favorites over the years, and I can definitely recommend this one. Next we have Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. This was really revolutionary when it came to the Saturn, just due to the quality of the animation, and this was also one of the games that supported the 4 meg RAM cart, so it really had some neat stuff in it. Very cool cast of characters in this one, and yeah, I don't know, I think the Saturn version holds up even today. This did come out on the US PlayStation, but they had to cut a lot of frames of animation, just like all the other PS1 ports, and definitely can't hold a candle to the Saturn version. Next we have Sega Ages Memorial Collection Volume 1. This is a pretty obscure Sega Ages arcade port release. This is not the same as the Sega Ages that we got in the US. It's just the same basic branding, but the games featured are quite a bit different. These are much older. This one has Head On, Pingo, Up and Down, which is a very underrated early Sega title, and Flicky. Flicky has been reported to the Sega Genesis amongst other compilation packs, but this one is well worth having, in my opinion, for Up and Down. The only Up and Down home port that was released before this was on the Atari 2600 that I'm aware of, and it's a very rare game for the 2600. But very fun game, and I don't think this one costs too much. There's a couple others of these Sega Ages Memorial collections out there. I should probably track down some of the other ones. Next we have the original Metal Slug, and this was another great port for the Saturn. Just basically the Neo Geo hit, downsized to the Saturn slightly, and this one supports the 1 meg cartridge that most of the SNK games do have. So basically all your classic Metal Slug action. I think there's one like extra training mode added, but other than that, pretty much a straight port of the arcade classic. I mentioned the Last Gladiators pinball game earlier. This is the exclusive Japanese pinball game, also part of that series, and this is Necronomicon. This one is known for having some really creepy and weird videos in it, along with pounding metal music by Dream Theater, which I'm not really a fan of. But the pinball action in this is very solid. The tables are very weird, but very authentic to a pinball style. And this game, I don't know, it seems like it's not talked about as much now as it was back in the peak of the Saturn, but this was really considered a landmark title for its time. One of the best pinball games up to that point. Next we have Precura Disecution. Hopefully I didn't butcher that one too much. This one is a really interesting isometric action game starring these two girls on the cover. And very colorful game, a lot of fun. It's a little bit short, if I do remember right, but I think this one's really neat. The one thing about this one is it came with a calendar for like 1997 in the package originally, which I thought was kind of funny. But otherwise, it's pretty straightforward action game and a lot of fun. Next we have one of the weirdest games that got a arcade port to the Saturn, and that is Puli Rula. This is another Taito-developed arcade game. This time it was not brought over by Ving, but Xing, and those are two totally different companies. Another great arcade port, however, this is part of Xing's Arcade Gears series, and this one has a lot of color and some really acid trip related graphics going on. If you have not seen video of this game, I would definitely encourage it. It's really a really strange beat 'em up. Is the best way to describe it. A lot of weird things going on. This one also came out on the Taito arcade packs, so I bought this years ago, and it's not necessarily as essential now as it used to be, but definitely a lot of fun for your Saturn. Next we have another one of the Puzzle and Action series games, and this one, again, I will totally butcher the title of this. Rokenai Chindarantaru. Yeah. No, probably did that really bad. Very much the same as that first one I showed you. It's mini games, a lot of mini games. This was a Taito, Sega arcade game, and this one also got the Sega Ages branding because it was a little bit later released. So, I believe there's, like I said, one more of this in the series, but these are a lot of fun. Next we have kind of an unheralded shooter for the Saturn, and that is Skull Fang. This is a Data East developed shooter. And this is part of a series that included Wolf Fang as well as Vapor Trail, if you've ever played the Genesis port of that. That was the first game in the series. I believe this was the second or third. I'm not sure which. I believe it also has the digitized voice, kind of like Vapor Trail did. Pretty solid shooter. Like I said, it's nothing really mind-blowing as far as your Saturn graphics, but it is a good port of the arcade game, and the only home port of this as far as I'm aware of. Next we have one of the shooters that people really went crazy for back in the Saturn day, and I don't really think you hear about it as much anymore. And again, I'm going to butcher the title of this one, but it's something like Tsukiyo Gurentai. And this is the Otokuo version of it. This is the re-release. So this one had, I believe, a demo of another Rising game. And maybe it's just that I just don't like Rising games that much, but this one I wasn't crazy about. But it did have some neat lighting tricks and graphical stuff that was kind of showing off the Saturn. So I think that's why it was well regarded at the time. Interestingly enough, EA ported this game in Japan. So EA definitely was taking more risks in Japan than the type of stuff we were getting here at the time. And yeah, cool to see them bringing over some shooters. Next is a pretty obscure one for the Japanese Saturn, and that is Thunderstorm LX3 and Road Blaster. And these are both Laserdisc arcade port games. So they're like FMB, or excuse me, they're QuickTime event games that have originally Laserdisc video showing them. So very nice versions of these. Road Blaster was also released on the Sega CD. We got a US port of that as Road Avenger, I believe. I'd have to double check that. And Thunderstorm, I think, also was considered Cobra Command on the Sega CD in the US. But these are the original Data East developed arcade ports. There's another pack like this that has Taito Laserdisc arcade packs, arcade game ports, but that one is even tougher to find than this one. So if you like that kind of stuff, they definitely exist in nice form on the Sega Saturn. Next is another shooter, and that is Twinbee Deluxe Pack Yahoo version. Ports of the two first Twinbee games in the arcade, or actually not the first two, but two Twinbee arcade games from the early 90s. Very colorful games. If you like Twinbee, you know you're getting more of the same here. I don't think they've aged particularly well, but they're decent shooters, and this game doesn't go for a ton of money. Next is Wonder 3, and this is part of the Arcade Gears series, again, by Xing. This was a Capcom arcade game that had a mix of 3 games in one. And it had a shooter, a platformer, and another type of action game mixed in with it as well. So you get Roosters, Chariot, and, oh, Don't Pull. That's right, it was a puzzle game. And the 3 of these games combined were all originally on one arcade board. They're all very colorful. They have some character crossover between games. Really interesting way that they presented these originally. However, again, this game has been re-released in the Capcom arcade collections, so it's not necessarily essential to buy on the Saturn. I just happen to own this for a long time. And that brings us last but not least to the very first game I bought for the Saturn in import form, and that is X-Men vs. Street Fighter. This game was the first, I believe, to support the 4-meg RAM cart, and the graphics on this one blew me away at the time. This is what got me into import games in the first place, so it has a very sentimental past with me. You know, it's one of the things that led me down the path of picking up a lot of import games over the years, stuff that I couldn't get in my home territory of the US. So very cool to have this on the Saturn. Really like this game. I still can pick up and play this today. The PS1 version is nowhere near as good, so that's one of the things that really gave you a lot of bragging rights for the Saturn back in the day. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like I said, this is my complete Sega Saturn import collection. I'd like to make a video of my domestic Saturn collection soon. I'm just trying to think of how best to do it. Please take a moment, like, comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon. Have a great day or night, wherever you are.